Apache twin girls invited him home. He didn't know they planned to marry him to their widowed mom. Tom was a man who had never really understood the idea of settling down. He was in his early 30s, still trying to figure out what he wanted in life. Most of his days were spent working at a local shop, fixing things, and helping his neighbors with whatever tasks they needed. His life was simple, quiet, and predictable. He didn't mind it that way. It was easier for him to avoid the complexities of relationships and big decisions. However, life has a funny way of surprising people when they least expect it. It all started on a breezy spring afternoon when Tom received an unexpected invitation from two twin girls. They weren't strangers. Tom had seen them around town a few times. They were friendly, but Tom didn't really know them well enough to think they would invite him over. The twins, named Rosa and Lee, had lived in the area for a couple of years, and although they seemed pleasant, they were also somewhat mysterious. They had a quiet confidence about them that intrigued Tom, but he had always kept his distance. After all, he didn't see much reason to get involved with anyone on a personal level. The invitation was simple enough. "Hey, Tom," Lee had said when she handed him the note, "we're having a small gathering at our place. Our mom's cooking, and we'd love for you to come over and join us. We think you'd really enjoy the food." Rosa smiled shyly next to her sister, holding out a fresh batch of cookies she'd baked earlier that day. At first, Tom hesitated. He wasn't used to socializing much, and he liked the quiet of his small, empty house. But something about their invitation caught him off guard. Maybe it was their warm, genuine smile or the way they seemed to understand him more than most people did. Whatever the reason, Tom found himself agreeing, albeit with some uncertainty. The address was simple, just a few miles outside of town, in a more secluded area that Tom wasn't entirely familiar with. As he drove down the winding road leading to their house, he couldn't help but wonder why they had invited him in the first place. He knew it wasn't for anything fancy or elaborate. They were just two girls, still in their 20s, living with their mother in a modest home. Maybe they just wanted to be friendly, he thought, shaking off the strange feeling building in his stomach. When Tom arrived at their home, he was greeted by the unmistakable smell of freshly baked bread and simmering stew. The girls were standing at the door, smiling warmly and waving him in. "We're so glad you could make it," Rosa said, her voice soft but inviting. Lee motioned for him to come inside, where he could hear the sound of cheerful chatter coming from the kitchen. Tom stepped inside, feeling slightly out of place but trying not to show it. The house was cozy, with wooden beams and a warm, rustic feel. It was clear that it was a well-lived-in space, filled with memories of family dinners and laughter. The table was set for a small gathering, with plates of food already prepared and steaming. Tom could see that the girls' mother, Sarah, was in the kitchen, moving gracefully as she stirred something in a pot on the stove. She didn't look up right away, but Tom could see the soft smile on her face as she worked. She was a quiet woman, older than the twins but still young at heart, with long, dark hair and kind eyes that seemed to watch everything with a quiet intensity. "Please sit down, Tom," Lee said, motioning to the table. "We've been looking forward to this." Tom hesitated for a moment before sitting down at the table. He wasn't sure what he expected, but the atmosphere was unexpectedly warm. As the evening unfolded, he found himself relaxing more than he expected. The conversation was easy, and the food was delicious. Sarah, the girl's mother, finally joined them at the table, and they all began talking about various things: the weather, the upcoming town festival, and the small joys of everyday life. But even as they spoke, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different about this evening. The twins were unusually attentive to him, more so than he would have expected for two young women who had barely known him. Every time he spoke, they would exchange subtle glances with each other, as if sharing some private joke or understanding. Tom thought it was just his imagination, but there was a certain air of expectation about the way they interacted with him. "Tell us about yourself, Tom," Rosa asked, breaking the silence that had settled over the table. "What do you enjoy doing when you're not working?" Tom thought for a moment before responding. "Well, I don't do much. I like to keep to myself, work on things around the house, maybe take a walk every now and then." He wasn't much of a talker, but he felt oddly comfortable around the twins, so he continued. "I don't really go out much. I guess I'm not much for socializing." The twins nodded knowingly, as though this was exactly what they had expected to hear. "We understand," Lee said softly. It can be hard to find the right company around here. Sometimes it feels like people don't really get you, doesn't it? Tom was taken aback. Yeah, I suppose you could say that. He didn't realize how much he had been feeling that way until she said it aloud. The conversation turned to lighter topics, but Tom couldn't shake the sense that something was building beneath the surface. The girls were kind, but there was something about their attention that seemed almost too intense. It was as if they were trying to figure something out, something deeper. And when Sarah joined in, her quiet demeanor only added to the mystery of the evening. She seemed to be watching him with a calm, yet penetrating gaze, as though she could see through him. As the evening wore on, the girls kept trying to engage him more, subtly pushing for deeper conversation. They were interested in his thoughts, his opinions, his experiences, things that, honestly, Tom wasn't used to discussing with strangers. But there was something about the way they asked that made him feel heard, understood. It was almost as if they knew exactly how to bring out the parts of him he usually kept hidden. The clock on the wall ticked away, and Tom found himself staying longer than he had planned. He couldn't quite explain it, but he felt oddly at ease in their presence. There was a sense of calm in their home, a peacefulness that he hadn't realized he was missing in his own life. As he finally stood up to leave, the twins and their mother insisted that he stay the night. "You're welcome to stay," Sarah said, her voice gentle. "It's getting late and we wouldn't want you to drive home so late. There's plenty of room." Tom glanced at the clock and realized it was well past midnight. He was tired and didn't want to drive back so late either. After a moment's hesitation, he agreed. "All right, I'll stay for the night." The girls led him to a guest room where he could sleep, and as they left him alone for the night, he lay there thinking about everything that had happened. It had been a strange evening, and though he couldn't quite put his finger on it, Tom felt a nagging feeling that something was about to change. What had started as a simple invitation had turned into something far more complicated, and Tom didn't yet understand what role he would play in the unfolding events. One thing was certain, though. This evening had set the stage for something bigger than he could have ever imagined. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room where Tom had spent the night. The house was quiet, but there was an air of warmth that seemed to surround him. He stretched, a little groggy from the unexpected sleepover, and sat up in bed. As he looked around the room, he realized that he wasn't quite sure what to expect today. The night had passed in a blur of pleasant conversation, and while he was grateful for the kindness, there was a growing curiosity, even a slight unease, tugging at him. He had no idea what would come next. The house was peaceful, but it felt different this morning. It was as if the previous evening's conversations were lingering in the air. He could still hear the sound of the twins, soft laughter, and Sarah's calm but direct voice offering him hospitality. But now, alone with his thoughts, he couldn't escape the sense that there was more to their invitation than he had first imagined. After a few moments, there was a gentle knock on the door. "Tom, breakfast is ready," Rosa called from the hallway, her voice as bright as the morning sun. "We've got pancakes and coffee. Would you like to join us?" Tom smiled, his hesitation melting away. "Sure, I'll be right there," he replied, trying to shake off the unease in his stomach. He walked down the narrow hallway and entered the kitchen, where the smell of fresh pancakes filled the air. Rosa and Lee were already at the table, talking softly to each other. Sarah was at the stove, turning pancakes with an easy, practiced motion. The moment Tom walked in, the twins turned their attention to him with smiles that seemed a little too knowing. There was something about their gaze that made him feel like he was being examined, but in the gentlest way possible. "Good morning, Tom," Lee said with a smile, her bright eyes sparkling. "How did you sleep?" "Good, thank you," Tom responded, taking a seat at the table. He noticed how warm the room felt, how comfortable it was. It wasn't anything fancy, but there was an undeniable charm in the simplicity of it all. He had grown up in a house much like this one, nothing luxurious, but filled with love and care. The warmth of the moment made him feel almost at home. "Would you like some coffee?" Sarah asked, her voice smooth and calming as she placed a steaming mug in front of him. "It's just brewed." Tom accepted the coffee gratefully, sipping it slowly as he looked at the two girls. There was a certain energy between them, a connection that Tom couldn't quite put his finger on. They seemed to share an unspoken understanding, something deeper than just being sisters. It was as though they were in perfect harmony with each other, like they were a team, united in purpose. The breakfast was simple but delicious. The pancakes were fluffy, topped with fresh fruit, and there was even homemade jam that added a sweet touch to the meal. Tom found himself enjoying the food more than he expected. It was so different from the usual hurried meals he had at home. Here, there was a sense of care in everything, from the way the food was prepared to the way the conversation flowed. As they ate, the conversation continued. At first, it was light and casual talk about the weather, local events, and the latest news from town. But then, without warning, the topic shifted to something deeper, something more personal. Rosa was the first to bring it up. "You know, Tom," she began, her voice gentle but serious, "Lee and I have been talking, and we really think you're a great guy. You've got a good heart. It's rare to meet someone like you around here." Tom felt a warmth rise to his cheeks. He wasn't used to receiving compliments, especially not from people he barely knew. He chuckled nervously, unsure of how to respond. "I'm just a regular guy, you know, nothing special." Lee smiled at him kindly. "You're more than just regular, Tom," she said. "You're different in a good way. You've got a quiet strength, something that we admire." Tom shifted in his seat, feeling the intensity of their words. He wasn't sure if they were trying to flatter him or if there was something else going on. There was an unusual level of attention being paid to him, and while he appreciated their kindness, it also made him feel a little uncomfortable. He didn't know how to handle the sudden attention. Sarah, who had been quiet until now, joined the conversation. "You know, Tom," she said softly, "it's not often that we get visitors like you. Most people in this town don't take the time to get to know us. But you've got something different about you. I can see it in the way you listen, the way you observe the world around you. It's rare and it's special." Tom was taken aback by the compliment, but he didn't know how to respond. The conversation had taken an unexpected turn, and he could feel his heart rate pick up slightly. He wasn't sure where they were going with this, but he couldn't deny that there was something captivating about the way they spoke to him. Lee noticed his hesitation and gave him a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, we're not trying to make you uncomfortable," she said. "We just think you're a good person, and that's rare around here." Tom nodded, unsure of how to proceed. He appreciated their words, but he still felt like something was off. There was an undercurrent of something more than just friendly conversation. It felt as though the twins were leading the conversation in a direction he hadn't anticipated, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to follow. After breakfast, they all moved to the living room, where they sat around and talked for a while longer. The conversation flowed easily at first, but again the twins began to steer it toward deeper, more personal subjects. They asked him about his childhood, his dreams, his family. Tom found himself opening up more than he usually did. There was something about their presence that made him feel safe, like he could trust them. And yet, with each passing question, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were trying to learn something about him, something important. Eventually, the conversation grew quieter, and Tom found himself staring out the window. The sun had risen higher, and the view of the valley outside was breathtaking. It was a peaceful sight, rolling hills, green fields, and a few scattered houses in the distance. He could see why the girls loved living here, so far away from the hustle and bustle of the town. The world outside was calm, tranquil, and full of promise. But as peaceful as the view was, Tom couldn't fully relax. His mind kept drifting back to the strange feeling that had settled in his stomach the night before. The twins, while kind and warm, had an air of mystery about them. It was almost as if they knew something he didn't. They seemed to be building something, and Tom wasn't sure if he was ready to be a part of it. The quiet in the room was broken when Lee spoke again. "You know, Tom, we've been talking about something lately, something important." Tom turned his gaze back to her, wondering what she meant. He could see the seriousness in her eyes, and it made his heart skip a beat. Sarah, who had been sitting quietly in her chair, joined the conversation once again. "Yes," she said, her voice steady but with an undeniable warmth. "We've been thinking about what's best for our family, and we believe you could be a part of that future." The words hung in the air, and Tom could feel his pulse quicken. What did they mean by that? What did they have planned? He couldn't help but feel that the girls, their mother, this whole family, was hiding something from him. And as much as he wanted to leave, to walk away from the situation and return to his quiet, solitary life, he couldn't deny the pull they had on him. Something told him he was about to become a part of their lives, whether he was ready or not. As the day unfolded, Tom couldn't help but feel like he was walking through a fog. The conversation from earlier still echoed in his mind, and every word the twins and Sarah had said seemed to carry more weight than he was prepared for. He tried to shake off the unease that had settled in his chest, but it lingered, a subtle reminder that something was amiss, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. After they had spent the morning talking and sharing stories, the twins invited him to take a walk with them around the property. It was a beautiful day, with clear blue skies and the sound of birds chirping in the distance. It seemed like the perfect way to clear his head, so Tom agreed. As they walked, the twins chatted casually about the land, their childhood, and the future they dreamed of for themselves and their family. They spoke with such enthusiasm that Tom almost forgot about the strange feeling he had earlier. He began to appreciate their company more. They were easy to talk to, their laughter infectious, and their energy contagious. It was a nice change from the quiet, lonely life he had been leading. However, as they reached the farthest point of the property, near a small pond that Tom had not noticed the day before, the mood shifted again. The twins stopped walking and turned to face him, their expressions now serious, even a little intense. Tom felt his heart skip a beat, unsure of what to expect next. "Tom," Rosa began, her voice softer now, more deliberate, "we want to talk to you about something important. Something that we've been thinking about for a long time." Tom nodded, but his stomach tightened. He had a feeling that whatever they were about to say would change everything. Lee stepped forward slightly, her hands clasped in front of her. "It's not easy for us to say this, but we believe it's time. We've always known that one day we would need someone strong, someone who understood us to help our family. And we think that person could be you." Tom blinked, unsure of what they meant. "I don't understand," he said, his voice shaky. "What are you saying?" Rosa and Lee exchanged a glance, and in that moment Tom realized that this was no ordinary conversation. They had been preparing for this moment. They had planned this, whatever this was, for some time. It felt like they had been waiting for him, and now that he was here, it seemed like everything was falling into place for them. Lee took a deep breath, as if gathering her thoughts. "Our mother, Sarah, she's been on her own for a long time. We love her dearly and we know she's strong, but there's something missing. We've been talking about it, and we believe she needs a partner, someone who can stand by her side. And Tom, we think you could be that person." Tom's heart raced. He had heard them speak about their mother, but he hadn't realized until now what they were suggesting. "Wait," he said, trying to process the words. "You want me to be with your mother? I don't understand." Rosa stepped in, her tone gentle but firm. "We don't mean just any kind of relationship. It's more than that. We believe you could be a part of our family, a part of the future we see for all of us. You're kind, thoughtful, and you've already shown that you're willing to be here with us. We think you're the one." Tom took a step back, feeling his world tilt slightly. "But I don't even know your mother like that," he said, his voice shaking. This is all so sudden, I don't even know if I'm the right person for this." The twins exchanged another look, one that spoke volumes. They had obviously been through this conversation many times before, and it was clear that they had a vision in mind for the future. They weren't asking him out of the blue. They had made their decision, and now they were asking him to become a part of it. "Tom," Lee said, her voice soft but insistent, "this isn't just about our mother. It's about us too. We've watched you, gotten to know you in our own way, and we believe you're the kind of man who could make our family whole. We've thought this through, and we want you to be a part of it." Tom stood there, speechless, his mind racing to process everything they were saying. His first instinct was to refuse, to run away and return to the life he had known before. He wasn't prepared for something this big, this unexpected. He had come here for a simple dinner, for a chance to get away from his own solitary existence, but now he felt like he had stumbled into something far more complex than he was ready for. "You don't have to make a decision right now," Rosa said, sensing his hesitation. "We just wanted you to know how we feel. We're not asking for anything from you today, but we want you to understand what we're offering, a future with us, a future where we can all be together." The silence between them was heavy. Tom looked at the twins, their faces full of sincerity, and then over at the pond that lay still and quiet before them. He wanted to say something, anything to make sense of it all, but the words wouldn't come. What they were offering wasn't something he had ever imagined for himself. He had always kept his distance from others, unwilling to commit to anything beyond the simplest of interactions. But now, standing in front of these two young women and seeing the hope in their eyes, he felt something stir within him, something that made him question everything he had known. Lee seemed to notice his struggle. "We don't expect you to rush into anything," she said quietly. "But we believe that if you give us a chance, you might see things differently. We just want to build something real, together." Tom took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. The weight of their words pressed heavily on him. He had never been one to make big decisions quickly, and this was undoubtedly the biggest decision he had ever been asked to make. Everything he had known about his life up until this point seemed to be shifting, and he didn't know if he was ready to embrace what they were suggesting. But even as he stood there, uncertain and confused, part of him couldn't deny the pull he felt toward them. The warmth of the house, the kindness of the twins, and the quiet, steady presence of Sarah, they had made him feel like he mattered in a way he hadn't felt in years. It was strange, and it was sudden, but it was real. "Give us time to think about it," Tom said finally, his voice steady despite the confusion swirling inside him. "I don't want to make any decisions until I understand what this all means, but I can't promise anything." The twins smiled softly, understanding the weight of his words. "Take all the time you need, Tom," Rosa said, her tone warm. "We're not going anywhere, but we're glad you're here with us." As they stood there by the pond, Tom couldn't help but wonder what his life would be like if he chose to take the next step. The offer was tempting, but the uncertainty was overwhelming. For the first time in a long time, he felt torn between two worlds, the one he knew and the one he was being invited into. And as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the land, Tom knew that whatever choice he made, it would change his life forever. The next few days passed by in a blur for Tom. The invitation, the conversation by the pond, and everything the twins had said continued to echo in his mind. He found himself unable to focus on anything for long, his thoughts constantly drifting back to the strange and unexpected offer that had been made to him. Part of him wanted to run away, to retreat to the quiet life he had known before, but there was something else, something deeper that kept him tethered to the decision he needed to make. He woke up early every morning, his mind racing with thoughts of Sarah, Rosa, and Lee. He had spent so many years keeping to himself, avoiding deep connections with anyone, but now everything was different. They had shown him a glimpse of something that felt real, something he hadn't known he needed. They had shown him a vision of a future that didn't feel empty and alone. But could he really take that step? Could he walk into a new life, one that wasn't just about him anymore? The twins were kind and patient, never pushing him too hard, but it was clear that they were waiting for him to make a decision. And every time he spoke with them, he felt the pull of their family, of the life they were offering. They were both so confident, so sure of what they wanted, and Tom couldn't help but wonder if they knew something he didn't. Could he really fit into their world? He didn't know, but he couldn't shake the feeling that if he didn't take a chance, he might regret it forever. One evening, as Tom sat outside on the porch, watching the sun set behind the hills, Lee came to sit next to him. She didn't say anything at first, just sat quietly, looking at the view alongside him. Tom appreciated the silence. It felt peaceful, and for a moment he forgot about the pressure he had been feeling. Finally, Lee broke the silence. "You've been thinking a lot, haven't you?" she asked softly, her voice gentle, as though she understood exactly what he was going through. Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. "I'm not sure what to think. Everything feels so different. I've always been alone, you know, and now everything's changed. You and Rosa, your mom. It's a lot to take in." Lee smiled, a soft, understanding smile that made Tom feel like she could see right through him. "I know it's a lot, Tom, but we're not asking you to change everything overnight. We just want you to see that there's a place for you here with us. If you want it." Tom looked at her, his heart racing. She was right. They weren't asking him to become someone else. They were asking him to be a part of their lives, to join their family. It wasn't about him giving up his identity, but about him being willing to open up to something he had never allowed himself to do before. The thought scared him, but at the same time, it made him feel alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted, his voice quiet. "I've been alone for so long, I've always kept people at a distance. It's hard to imagine anything else." Lee nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I understand. It's not easy to change, especially when you're used to being on your own. But you don't have to do it all at once. We'll take things slow, step by step, and we'll be here for you. No rush." Her words comforted him, but they also made him realize how much he had been shutting himself off from others. He had always told himself that being alone was easier, that it protected him from the complications of relationships. But now, with Lee sitting next to him, her warmth and sincerity making him feel more connected than he ever had, he couldn't help but wonder if he had been wrong all this time. The next day, Sarah invited him to join them for a trip into town. It was a simple outing, just the three of them, but Tom found himself looking forward to it more than he expected. As they drove through the familiar streets of the small town, he realized that, for the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged. The twins chatted with each other as Sarah drove, their laughter light and carefree. Tom listened, letting their voices wash over him, and for the first time he didn't feel like an outsider. When they arrived in town, they visited the local market, picking out fresh vegetables and some handmade goods from a small shop run by a sweet elderly couple. Tom found himself helping carry the bags, enjoying the simplicity of the task. It felt natural, as though he had always been a part of this life. Later, as they sat down for a meal at a small cafe, Sarah turned to Tom with a serious look on her face. "Tom," she began softly, "I know this might be a lot for you. But I want you to know that, if you choose to stay with us, we're not asking you to change who you are. We just want to share our lives with you. We believe in family, and we believe that you could be a part of ours." Tom felt a lump form in his throat. He had never heard words like that before. It was so simple, yet so profound. They weren't asking for anything except for him to be a part of their world, to open his heart to the possibility of something new. It wasn't about expectations or pressure, it was just about belonging. "I don't know if I'm ready to make that commitment yet," Tom said, his voice steady but uncertain. "But I'm willing to take things one step at a time. I don't want to rush into anything, but I do want to see where this goes." The twins smiled at him, their faces lighting up with relief. "That's all we ask, Tom," Rosa said softly. "Take it slow, get to know us, and if you decide it's right for you, we'll be here." As they sat there, enjoying the warmth of the afternoon and the comfort of each other's company, Tom realized something important. He had been so focused on the fear of change, on the uncertainty of what might happen, that he had forgotten to see the beauty in what was right in front of him. He didn't need to have all the answers right away. He didn't need to make a decision today or tomorrow or even next week. What mattered was that he was open to the possibility of a new future, one that included not just him, but people who cared about him. The rest of the day passed in a blur of easy conversation and quiet moments, and as they drove back to the house, Tom felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It wasn't a loud, overwhelming feeling, but a quiet, steady sense that maybe, just maybe, he was ready for something more than the solitary life he had built for himself. He wasn't sure where this path would lead, but he knew that for the first time in a long time, he wasn't walking it alone. That night, as he lay in bed, Tom stared out the window at the starry sky. The world seemed vast and full of possibilities, and he realized that, for the first time, he didn't have to face it on his own. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he was no longer afraid to find out where this journey might take him. The days turned into weeks, and Tom found himself gradually adjusting to life at the twins' house. Every day, he woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside his window, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee that Sarah would always have waiting for him. He had become part of their routine, and although it was a far cry from the solitary life he had once known, he didn't mind. In fact, it began to feel like home. He spent his mornings helping around the house, whether it was fixing things that needed repair or simply lending a hand in the garden. The work was satisfying, but what Tom found most fulfilling was the sense of belonging that seemed to grow with each passing day. There was something about the way Sarah, Rosa, and Lee cared for one another that made him want to be a part of it. They didn't just live together. They supported each other, laughed together, and even argued in a way that felt healthy and natural. It was a far cry from the silence that had filled Tom's own home for so many years. One afternoon, as they sat around the kitchen table sharing stories, Sarah turned to Tom with a thoughtful look in her eyes. "Tom," she began, her voice calm but earnest, "we've been talking a lot as a family, and we want you to know that we appreciate you being here. You've become an important part of our lives, and we want you to feel like you belong." Tom felt a rush of warmth in his chest. It was the kind of statement that filled the empty spaces he had once carried within himself. He had always told himself that he didn't need anyone, that he was fine on his own. But now, surrounded by this family who had welcomed him with open arms, he realized just how much he had been missing. "I don't know if I'm ready for everything yet," he replied, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I do feel like I'm starting to belong here." Rosa smiled, her eyes shining with understanding. "That's all we want, Tom. We're not asking you to make any big decisions. We just want you to take your time. We want you to be a part of this family, but only if it feels right for you." Tom nodded, appreciating her words. He knew that they weren't pushing him to rush. They were allowing him the space to make his own choices, and that made all the difference. He had never felt this kind of acceptance before, and it was a feeling that was slowly growing on him. He didn't have to have all the answers. He didn't need to know exactly where his future with them was heading. What mattered was that he was willing to explore it, to let it unfold at its own pace. Over the next few weeks, Tom became more and more involved in their lives. He shared meals with them, worked alongside them, and slowly began to open up about his own past, his childhood, the struggles he had faced growing up, and the quiet isolation he had lived in for most of his adult life. The twins listened intently, never judging, always supportive. It felt strange at first to share so much, but the more he did, the more he realized just how much he had been holding back all these years. One evening, as they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set behind the hills, Sarah turned to Tom with a gentle smile. "I'm glad you're here, Tom," she said softly. "You've brought a new light into our home. It's not easy for anyone to open up, but we're grateful that you've allowed yourself to be part of our lives." Tom felt a lump form in his throat. It was hard to express how much her words meant to him. For so long, he had kept everyone at arm's length, afraid to let anyone get too close. But now, surrounded by these people who truly cared about him, he felt like he was finally beginning to heal. He didn't need to carry the weight of loneliness anymore. They had given him something he had never known he needed, a place where he could truly be himself. The following weekend, the twins invited Tom to join them for a family gathering in the nearby town. It was a small event, just a group of friends and relatives coming together to celebrate the harvest. Tom had never been one for big social events, but he agreed to go, eager to see how their extended family interacted. As they walked through the bustling town square, Tom found himself surprised by how comfortable he felt. People greeted the twins with warmth and affection, and soon, Tom found himself in the midst of a lively conversation, laughing and enjoying the company of people he had never met before. By the end of the evening, as they made their way back home, Tom realized something important. He had always feared being in crowds, always feared being the outsider. But in that moment, surrounded by Sarah, Rosa, and Lee, he felt like he had found his place. It wasn't about fitting in. It was about finding people who made him feel like he belonged, no matter who he was or where he came from. As the weeks turned into months, Tom continued to grow closer to the family. The awkwardness that had marked his first few days with them slowly faded, replaced by a deep sense of connection. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when Tom questioned whether he was truly ready for the changes in his life. But with each passing day, he became more certain that this was where he was meant to be. One evening, as they sat together around the dinner table, Sarah turned to him with a smile that spoke volumes. "You know, Tom," she said, her voice warm and affectionate, "we've all been thinking about you. You've brought so much joy into our lives, and we want you to know that we consider you family now. You don't have to make any big decisions today or tomorrow. But whenever you're ready, know that you have a place here with us." Tom felt a surge of emotion. He had come so far from the man who had walked into their home months ago, unsure of what to expect. Now he could see a future, one that included not only the twins and their mother, but also the life they had built together. It was a future that felt full of promise, full of warmth, and full of love. "I think I'm ready," he said quietly, his voice steady but filled with a deep sense of gratitude. "I'm ready to be a part of this family, and I'm grateful for everything you've given me." The twins smiled, and Sarah's eyes softened with pride. "We're glad, Tom," Rosa said. "We've always known you were meant to be a part of us." And in that moment, Tom realized that he had found something far more valuable than he had ever imagined. A family that had taken him in, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. A family that had shown him that, no matter how difficult or uncertain life might seem, There was always a place for him, a place where he could be loved, accepted, and truly understood. As he sat there, surrounded by the people who had become his family, Tom felt a peace settle over him. The road ahead might still have its challenges, but for the first time in his life, he knew that he wasn't walking it alone. And that, he realized, was more than he could have ever hoped for.